Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Far From Eden podcast. If you're returning, welcome back. If this is your first time tuning in, I do hope you find it enlightening enough to give episode 1 and 2 a shot as well. We've had some really good content so far. And as you already know, I'm getting into some gray areas with my guests. And this week, I have TK here, who's been a friend of mine for a few years now. And he's just going to walk us through his own journey to achieving discipline. And his quote is, "Those who have discipline are truly free, and those who don't are slaves to their desires." This is really a tough one. And I learned so much during this conversation. It couldn't have come at a better point in my life. And I hope that you guys feel the same by the end of this. And once again, as usual, please remember to subscribe, follow, like, and interact with us as much as possible through YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and Facebook. Find all the handles in the comments and links on my social media pages. That said, let's get to this. And as usual, I will always guarantee that you want to listen till the end. Okay, so I am just going to start by welcoming TK to the third episode of the Far From Eden podcast. TK, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity for me to come and share my thoughts on a few things that I've experienced in my short life.
Yeah, so TK and I have known each other for, is it 4 years now? 5 years?
Yeah, well, 4 or 5 years now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we both grew up in the same country, but we met here in Vancouver because I grew up in a city isolated from everyone else. And yeah, over the years, we've had some deep conversations, sometimes in really weird scenarios.
Yes, definitely. There've been interesting conversations that have been had over the last 5 years.
Yeah. And TK is here to talk about discipline. So I've introduced his topic already in the intro. So we're just going to get into it. And yeah, first of all, I just want to know, how did you get to choosing this quote to be your life philosophy or your current goal right now?
So naturally, to be honest, it came from watching the runner Eliud Kipchoge break the 2-hour barrier for the marathon. I think it was last year or the year before that. In one of the speeches that he gave after that, he talked about discipline, and he left the quote that those who are disciplined are free, because those who aren't are slaves to their desires. And for me, this quote always stuck in my head for the longest time. But I was like, what's true freedom? Sometimes you think about discipline and you're like, it's locking myself into this into the schedule of waking up early, going to the gym, working, doing all these other things. And it's like you feel like you're constricting yourself to doing a set number of activities for a certain period of time so that you get a certain result. But in essence, that quote, when I heard it, it changed my perspective into the sense that being disciplined is actually choosing something and doing it. And that's what freedom really is, right? It's the ability to choose and choose an activity you want to do and following through to do it, as opposed to choosing something you want to do and then not doing it, which is not freedom in a sense. So when I started seeing discipline like that, I started looking for ways in my life to try do those things, like just writing a list of things that I want to do by the end of the month or the end of the week, and just following through with those things. And obviously I've failed numerous times, and I wouldn't say I'm disciplined per se right now, but it's something that you continuously work towards. And that quote just stuck with me because I was like, it's a process. I'm not going to be perfect in it one day. I'm not going to wake up one day and just be disciplined, but I can break it down into chunks where I can say, I'm going to be disciplined about this, like about my phone usage, or I'm going to be disciplined about the friends that I have, and breaking it down into sub categories that I can actually work towards, and as a result, end up achieving that freedom of being disciplined.
Yeah, well, that's super interesting, and I think it's a big one for a lot of us. And I like where you started with it, being able to start perceiving discipline as maybe a prison of some sort, and a bunch of constraints that you're putting on yourself, and more as giving you freedom to well, to basically live the life you desire, I'm assuming from what you're saying. But walk us through that. So how do you go from, well, how did you, in your case, go to perceiving it, whether mentally on a practical basis, from just like constraining and like imprisoning you to actually seeing it as a form of freedom?
So for me, it took me back to a video that I watched when I was in first year, and um, it was a person who was preaching, and the sermon was centered around it was called "Bear the Fruit of the Season," right? And it was speaking metaphorically about seasons in your life, and that there's seasons in your life that you go through where things may be tough or things may be great, and in every season, there's a Bible that says bear fruit in every season. There's a Bible verse that says bear fruit in every season. And that verse was being applied metaphorically to the seasons of your life that you go into. And sometimes it's a season of hardship where you have to learn certain things about yourself. But through learning those things, you are bearing the fruit of that season. And you can then move on to the next season of your life, which may be the summer season, and everything is good. But even when things are that good, there's still a lot to learn, and there's a lot of fruit to bear in that season before you move on to the next season of your life. And when I heard this quote about discipline, it just took me back to that video, in the sense that it showed me that there's a certain thing I'm meant to learn in this season of my life, where the pandemic kind of threw me into the wilderness in terms of my discipline, because from also graduating during the pandemic also did this, because from school, you had a structured schedule. You go to classes, you study for this long, you've got exams, you've got these 3-month goals that you're working towards to, I want to pass this class, I want to get good grades. And your life is somewhat very structured. And transitioning out of that, when I graduated into like the real world of working and etc., whilst I was going through a pandemic, that kind of put me into all sorts of like chaos in my life, in the sense that when you start working, you're not really working towards like something that's big, like an exam, and your successes are not really seen on like that 3-month cadence. So it's now a matter of, how do you remain self-motivated? How do you remain pushing yourself outside the bounds of your 9 to 5 to still attain those goals you want to attain? So is it, okay, I want to go to the gym for 3 months and lose this much weight, or I want to read this book, I want to read a book every month and like really implement what I've learned. So the mindset change really came as a result of just reflecting on my life and seeing that there's a lot of things that are happening to me, but I'm not choosing for them to happen to me. So I wake up, I go to work, I work hard, and then at the end of the day, I'm tired and I go to sleep, but I haven't really done anything that fulfills my purpose besides work that 9 to 5 job. So in reflecting about that and really trying to look at the future, I was like, what am I doing outside the bounds of this job and outside the bounds of like hanging out with friends that's really pushing me towards my purpose? So, and that led to the mindset change in the sense that I should stop. I need some discipline. I need some structure similar to what school was, but I need that in my social life. I need that in my professional life, and I need that in my like career in terms of attaining those goals that I want to reach out to. And adding that structure came as a result of discipline. So looking into discipline, how can I be disciplined in saying that if I'm going to set this goal, I'm going to do it and I'm going to work towards it. I may not do it perfectly on the first day or the second day, but I can work towards it, because I think perfection really is in that process of doing these things repetitively that you may not want to do, you may not like doing. And yeah, so the mindset change in conclusion kind of came from just reflecting on my life, linking things that I'd learned from the past and trying to implement it on a step-to-step basis on things that I can do now, and that will progress me to those goals that I have in my life.
You know, I find like one thing that you say during the entire speech super interesting. You said when things it started feeling like things were just happening to you as opposed to you actually doing them. So yeah, I'm curious about that. Like what actually happens for you to get to that point where you're like, I'm not in control of this anymore. It's almost like you're an autopilot and you're just moving. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I think for me personally, that stage it just happened. I just fell into it. I don't think I have a reasoning or a story behind how I just came into a stage where I just thought things were happening to me. I still had the same core group of friends. I still worked relatively the same hours of work. But outside of those work hours, there was no structure in terms of like even like what I ate or what time I'll go to sleep to regulate my sleeping. And there was just no schedule that felt right. Like I was just doing things. If I wake up and someone says, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I already like knew that I was like, what like my schedule was open. So I would just say, "I'm free, let's meet up." So like things like that where I'm not really being intentional about even the friends that I have or the time that I'm spending with certain people. I was just letting things happen to me. Like I would wake up, whatever this day has in store for me is what I do. And I would go to bed and I'm like, okay, I'm not fulfilled. I'm not really feeling happy about what I did, but life goes on. I've hung out with friends. I've gone to work and I've done a good job of work, but I'm not really progressing in anything that's more than that those two aspects of my life. So yeah, I guess that's how I came to that realization that like we dude, like what's exactly are your priorities right now? What are you looking forward to? You've got these big or hairy audacious goals that you want to reach, but right now you're not doing anything to reach those goals, or you're not being disciplined enough to reach those goals. So as a process, that's where it started.
Yeah, and I asked you this question just to get to this very point as well, where it's like, I guess a question for a lot of people, and I think this will help a lot of people, is whether the discipline comes first or the purpose and the goal come first. Because I know a lot of people who maybe don't even like understand what their vision is, therefore they have no idea what to implement. And then it's it tends to be mixed up in speech and so on when we talk about it, whether you need to know what you're aiming for before you start to discipline yourself, or the discipline comes for you to hear what the goals are or whatever it is, whatever your process is. What do you think? Um, like, how do you think it goes? Like, in your opinion? Yeah.
One quote that I've read and I live by as well is that we don't rise to the level of our aspirations. We fall to the level of our systems. So the first way I look at it from a very elementary perspective is how do I create a system that allows me to see my goal? Is there any test I can take? Is there any character or personality test that allows me to see what type of a person I am and what I like doing per se? And then from there, then taking a step further, okay, are these things actually things that I like? So let's say I take the Myers-Briggs personality test and I'm a I don't know what, like the 16 personalities test, and you see that you're something, and there's certain characteristics that come with being that personality. Like taking a step further in the system, okay, looking now, okay, do I really agree with this? Is this something that I'm passionate about? Is this something that I can see myself doing over the next 10, 20, 30 years for the rest of my life? If I was not being paid to do this thing, would I still love doing it? And then taking it a step further and then saying, is this thing going to allow me to live the life that I want to live? Because I think sometimes we look at purpose as this thing that's meant to be um so holy, and like my purpose is always helping people. But at the end of the day, like even if your purpose is helping people, you still need to survive. You still have responsibilities and needs that you need to meet in your own personal life. So like, is your purpose really driving you forward to meet those goals that you have for your personal life as well? So I think that's a system that I've used. I used to struggle with what my purpose is, and that's something that I still haven't really figured out per se. But the first thing I did was like I looked at all these personality tests I took through school, through other jobs that I had, excuse me, and then took it to a step further and said, okay, this is what the the experts in psychology are saying that I am like, and these are the things that I like. And I listed out about like 5 to 10 things that I really like doing. One of those things was talking. So I really like just like talking and sharing stories and being a storyteller and making people laugh and something like that. And I was like, okay, these personality types are matching along with something that I really like doing. Now, push how do I push it to a level further in terms of like my purpose in the long term? So me transitioning from even like working in finance to working in marketing was based on that, because I like telling the story, and marketing was more storytelling based. You are walking through a customer journey, and you're talking about each step of the buying process that they need to go through before they actually buy the product you're trying to market to them. And that storytelling aspect, I really loved it. And even with a job that I do today, I love presenting and I love giving presentations, especially on like customer journey, customer discovery type of work. So I think just creating a system that allows you to, first of all, look at who you are, get an understanding of who you are, look at things that entertain you and the things that you like doing, and then looking at, is this something that can sustain my life going forward? And I think that's a system that works for me, and it has worked for other people I've shared it with. So yeah, I mean, obviously sort of one size shoe fits all, but that's a system that has worked for me.
What you just said now reminded me of something that my dad used to say to us when we were growing up. So my dad had this statement that he would repeat like at weird times in different words, but basically in summary, the lesson was you can either choose freedom to or freedom from. And I'm pretty sure this is not an original statement, but it's something that he liked. And my dad would always say, do the right thing because it is right. Like he didn't want a lot of explanations and so on. But why that freedom to and freedom from thing I was reminded of that when you were speaking is you did bring up like when you're the searching for purpose part, that sometimes it comes down to the micro things of I want this, but I also need to be free from this. So I need to be, I don't know, free from a level of poverty, right? For me to have this major goal. And I need to be free from this in order to get that. So that's where the discipline aspect comes in, right? That I can have all the freedom to do this and hang out with this person and that person all the time, but I need freedom from that in order to have like greater freedom. So basically where I'm going with this is how when it comes to transitioning between those two freedoms, because you did rightfully say at the beginning that discipline almost comes across as a prison initially until you're able to navigate that mentally. So yeah, that being said, I guess my question is when you're starting to navigate that transition between having all the freedom to do this and be around all these people and go to all these places without a plan, and then now the freedom from those things and more the freedom to go into it more disciplined and more conscious, like what kind of happens there as in terms of what do you lose and what do you gain, like based on your experience, how have you felt navigating it?
Well, that's an interesting question. One thing that I definitely have gained from having this perspective on discipline is that it has helped me value the things that I want to reach to in the future way more than the desires I might have right now. So, and I think that's how I would actually define discipline for myself, that it's putting a greater value on the things you want in your future over the value you place on your desires for right now. So a simple example is I want to read more books so that I gain knowledge on a certain topic. Reading is not an actively a fun thing to do, but you understand the level of knowledge that you want to attain for future on, and you place a higher value on that than the discomfort that you have right now. Instead of sleeping or watching a Netflix show, you're going to read. That value of watching that Netflix show, you place a lower value on that. And naturally you start looking at these things like, okay, my future is way more important than my now, but I still need to understand my now significantly contributes to what my future is. Yeah. And another thing that also helped me like gain a better perspective around discipline was looking at the people that I aspired to be, like all the people that I look up to, these people who have written books on multiple subjects, that are entrepreneurs, people who have attained success in whatever field they've attained and that success in. There's always a time where they write in their life story that there was a time where I had to consecrate myself, take myself away from the crowd and do certain things that the crowd was not doing, placing a greater value on the change I want to bring or the product I want to bring, and placing a greater value on that future thing than the now. Because everybody, it's cool, it's fine. Everybody can go partying, everybody can go chill out with friends. It was the summer, everybody can go chill at the beach. But it's like taking that extra step to say like, yes, this is something that I find is fun, and there's maybe something that's even good for my mental health. But I'm going to take a break from doing these things so that I can just give myself an extra 5 hours to work on my business idea, or give myself an extra 5 hours to work on just like the way I think, read a book, and then come back to doing all these things, because there'll always be time to hang out with friends. There's always time to be with family. So just placing that greater value on what you think is important for your future over the value that you place on the desires that you have right now. And I think having that perspective allows you to, it really changes something in your perspective. And for me, as I said, like, I'm not the most disciplined person, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But it's a process. It's a process that I'm on, and it's a process that I've seen to work. Like, I saw it work when I was in school, when I was placing the value on my graduation to be significantly more important than hanging out with friends in the dorms. When I was preparing for my job, I was like, studying these interview questions and practicing them in the mirror is significantly way more important than me watching this Netflix show right now. And consistently, if you build that habit of being able to see the true value of things in the future over the value of things you do right now, I think that allows you to take a lot of big strides in your journey towards being disciplined.
Yeah, like I really like how you brought it into the small things. So from your experience, how, like, I don't know, sacrificing a night with friends really helped you even get to a point of graduating. And it's the small things that you take away from the day-to-day that you do, right? And I'm thinking about it from a human perspective. So we both studied economics. I'm gonna try not to make it too technical. But I know there's a concept that we even talk about in human econ, where there's it's discounted future value, to put it in simple words. So even when they're looking at the value of, say, money, you include inflation in that, right? So to say that $100 today is not the same as $100 tomorrow, and it works that same way conceptually, even as human beings. So me thinking about, I don't know, not spending my $20 today in this moment when I'm hungry doesn't feel like there's the same value. That $20 will be of the same value tomorrow when I'm, in my mind, where I'm not as hungry as I am anymore. So that's something I want to chat a bit about. Like, I understand it from like a theoretical perspective, where it's like, okay, let's value tomorrow more. But now on a day-to-day basis, like, tackling that, how has that been for you? And how is it going for you? Because you did clearly say you're right at the beginning. Let's talk a little more about those.
It's a struggle. Like, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I have numerous phone calls with like a mutual friend that we have, and me and him always discuss it, that like we set out these goals, and it seems as if we haven't really been pushing towards them on a day-to-day basis. And it made me realize something, that the cadence that you have in terms of setting your goals is a really big determining factor in whether you're going to attain those goals or not. So taking a step back, and I'll use school as the best example, because I think a lot of people can like relate to that. So in school, you have, when you enroll in a class, you're like, the end goal is, I want to pass the class, right? I want to get a good grade, or I want to pass the class, depending on what type of student you are. And that's a long cadence. That's about 3 to 4 months, right? But in between, there's midterms. So that's maybe 1.5 to 2 months. Every 1.5 to 2 months, you're studying for midterms. And then some classes have weekly tests. So every week, you're doing something that you're studying for these tests that prepare you for the midterm and then prepare you for the final. So if you really want, one thing that analogy just made me really fully understand that if I really want to see differences in terms of the goals that I set and being disciplined, it's not on an every week thing. It's not on an every 3 months thing. It's on a day-to-day basis, and even shortening it more to even like an hourly basis, and really seeing, this hour that I just spent, did I use it right? Did I waste time? Did I do things that actually helped me or not? And this seems like very like serious and all that, like, oh, you shouldn't waste an hour or so. But if you start thinking like that, then you start valuing every minute that you have, and you start looking at, okay, this phone call that I'm about to go on with this person most probably is going to be 30 minutes. Are these 30 minutes really necessary? Is there a better way I could have spent this 30 minutes? And it's not saying that you should be working or like grinding and like not resting and doing that stuff. But sometimes ignoring a call or ignoring like not reading that book tonight so that you rest is the important thing to do in that moment. And if you
Yeah.
shorten the cadence of the things that you need to do to rest to reach your goals, I think it becomes more attainable. So going back to the analogy of school, if I studied for all my weekly tests, I'd have been better prepared for my midterms. I'd have been better prepared for my final. But I didn't study a lot for those tests every week. I
Let's be honest.
disliked classes. I really disliked classes where they gave us weekly tests. Was I felt as though the teacher was trying to dictate my schedule. Like,
Yeah.
why do I have to study for your class every week? I can study for your class once every 4 weeks and pass the midterm. That's a better thing. That was my preference. But looking back now, I like truly understand that like if I studied every week and like wrote notes and did these things weekly, then by the time the final comes, there was no need to do these like sleepless nights in the library trying to like learn 4 months worth of stuff in 2 nights. Um, so I think transposing that to my life, then looking maybe on a daily basis, like starting off with like these are 3 things I'm going to do today. I'm going to read a page of this book. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to be diligent at my work. I'm going to work hard and do like top quality work to the best of my ability. And that's the way I've started the process for me. It's like, am I praying every day? Because my faith is very important to me. So am I praying every day? Am I at least reading one Bible verse, even if it's just one, like to start off with? And then the next thing is like when I'm at work, am I wasting time at work? Like you're working from home, there are things that you can. There's certain times where you don't really have work, and you can take a break and not do something. But am I being diligent? Am I being a good steward of what I have and these blessings that I have in my life? And then the third thing is this: like I'm trying to read I last year I set the goal of reading a book a week, and of reading 2 books every month, and I didn't attain it. And then this year I was like, yeah, I'll do it, but I'm nowhere close to that. So
Yeah.
in the next 4 months, I have to read 25 books to reach this. So it's going to be interesting. That's a book a week, but I don't think I'm going to reach that as well. But really, just saying, okay, I'm going to read a chapter today. I'm gonna take notes. I'm gonna watch a YouTube video on this specific topic and learn something. And I think the last thing I'll say on this is that it's not always about doing something that's serious.
Mm.
Sometimes hanging out with friends is what you need right now. That self-awareness of knowing that, okay, I've worked my ass off for the last 2 weeks. I just need a drink with a friend and to not think about work. And if that's what you need, that's also being disciplined, because you're making the active decision of understanding who you are, what you need, and doing those things that you actually need right now for you to still reach your goal in the future. So yeah, so discipline is not just on things that are serious and going to the gym and being on a diet and everything, but sometimes just being discipline is like, I'm going to be intentional about my friendships. Every time I meet up with a friend, every time I go for drinks or food, I'm going to have a good conversation with my friend and really be present to hear what they're going through and really discuss about their stories. And that's a form of discipline as well, like really being there for the people who are there in your life.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that, like explore that a bit, the balance. Because when I think when we think discipline, I think for the most part, or the way that it's always been classified, do you think like the entire time you were talking, I was also thinking about this. There's a video I recently watched that came from one of the podcasts I'm really into, and this guy was talking about meditation and how. So I've always meditated, but when I heard him talk about it, it was very different because he said in the morning he talks to God. He's Christian, so he talks to God about the things he's grateful for, about the people he's praying for, and then in the evening it's literally just him reflecting on the day, every hour that he can remember. So almost like journalizing it, but in thought form. And I mean, those are the things that we think of when we think about discipline, right? We think about sitting by yourself, alone, meditating. Yeah, meditating there, maybe talking to God is something for a lot of people. But that the balance between there's discipline, like, and you rightfully just mentioned now there's discipline with friends, like being able to balance and say, oh, now it's time for me to hang out with a friend. This is what I really need right now. How do you strike that balance? Because when you go through something like this, a shift like this, you either villainize one or the other, right? So we tend to go into extremes, especially with the way our generation does things in general. And we'll get into that a little later.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you balance that? Like knowing what you need.
That's a really awesome question. I have not figured out a solution to that balance, to finding that balance. But the way I tend to think of it is think of it from a perspective of, so let me take a step back. We're talking
Mm.
about reflection. I think there's no progress at all without a reflective culture. If you're not reflecting on your life, I don't think you're making progress, because how do you know what to change? How do you know what you're working towards? Like there's a lot of stuff that you learn from just like journaling. And that's something I'm happy that I've remained consistent with over the last few years. Like every week or every day, I'll like write something in my notes app and like reflect on something that I've done, because I want to see the progress of the steps that I've taken on this journey. I think it also comes with an understanding of who you are as a person, understanding what refuels your energy. So, as I said, I like talking a lot. I like being with friends, cracking jokes, and just
Yeah.
being out there.
Your
I would say,
energizer.
yeah, I'm an energizer. Like I'm an extrovert like that, right? And I love that. But I have to also understand that there's certain times where, and I value that, because that's how I feel as if that's how I refuel my energy. Like you spend a whole week in your house working and not really having a lot of human interaction. So by the time Friday comes, you're like, I'm keen and eager to go meet friends and really like hang out with them. And that's something that I feel as if like puts energy back into my soul and puts energy back into me. So that's something I'll never want to cut off from any discipline thing that I start doing, because it's an energy thing. But if you really look at it, sometimes people see that as like, oh, I shouldn't hang out with my friends right now because we don't really talk about business stuff. We don't really talk about personal development and growth and like world issues. We just go talk about like other people, or we just go talk about like stories that are not really important. But it's a level of self-awareness, right? That you need to have on how do I refuel my energy, and how do I find that balance between hanging out with people and still allocating enough time to do the work. So my solution has always been trust yourself, TK, to know yourself. Like no one knows you more than yourself, and maybe God knows you more, but like no one knows you more than yourself. There's certain times I know when I'm out with friends, I'm like, I really should not be here. Like I should be
Mm.
doing something else. And there's certain times I'm out, I'm like, this is the best thing because I've worked my ass off this whole week. This is like my reward for doing things that have led me towards my goal. And really being able to listen to yourself. And I think that comes with a lot of self-awareness, that comes with a lot of reflection and meditation, really thinking about what you value and how you allocate time to those things. I think,
Mm.
yeah. So I know, like, I think I'm pretty in touch with what I need to do. There's a verse that Paul says, "The things that I need to do are the things I don't do, but the things I don't want to do are the things that I do." And I feel as if
Mm.
it's a process that I go through as well. That there's a lot
Mm.
of things that I know I should not be doing these things, but I do them because it's like it just takes away the brain, like the energy to think, and just like it's a good break from life and all these other things. But just self-awareness of knowing that, TK, you should not be here. You really should not be doing
Mm.
this thing right now, because there's more important things you can be doing. And also
Mm.
having that self-awareness of saying that, yes, I should be doing these things right now because I deserve this break, and this is how I refuel my energy.
Mm. Mm. That's very interesting because like from personal experience, it kind of happens like what you're talking about. And I think what I'm trying to understand from a lot of people is whether like getting to that point where you know that this is not somewhere I should be comes from having spent a lot of time by yourself, or it's something that you learn through other people. Because I have very, very, very strong, I would say, feelings of
Mm-hmm.
guilt when I'm not supposed to. And I now know to distinguish between the two. There's like the feelings of guilt where you're a workaholic and you always feel like you have to be doing something. I think I've grown past that. But I get when there's a consistent lack of effort on my part, I get very, very strong feelings of guilt, and they tend to come out in different ways. Sometimes they'll come out in mood swings, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or like the people that usually make you so happy just start to irritate
Yeah.
you. And you find yourself just unhappy with this, or you start off, you're the bottle popper, and you start off like, hey, this is gonna be so cool, and then an hour in, you're you feel like you don't know why you left the house, and so and like I found it easiest to be disciplined at times like that, where I have to admit that no, it's now coming out in forms of exhaustion or whether it's depression, however people want to
Mm-hmm.
term it. But we also live in a generation, and this is where I wanted to go with this. We also live in a generation of extremes.
Mhm.
So and then a lot of things come into it, like mental health and so on. And I'm thinking about the second part of your quote that says slave, like becoming a
Mhm.
slave to your desires. And that part is interesting because there's a lot of things during the day that you don't feel like doing, but you need to do.
Mhm.
And that's something I don't think we address enough. Where and a lot of the narrative now is if you don't feel like doing it, allow yourself, forgive yourself, and da, da, da. And I get that. That's all good. I guess that's all fair.
Mhm.
But there comes a point where you even start to become a slave. Like your body now knows that if I just say no, if I say no, she'll sit down.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's always choosing that easier thing. So that's where my question about balance came from. Where and I'm pretty sure a lot of us have experience with mental health and not being able to balance that. But I'm just curious from your perspective, like how do you find how do you find um, like treading that thin line between listening to your body and listening to what your mind needs and so on, and just like working around that in a disciplined sense. It makes sense. The slave part. Yeah, let's address
Yeah,
the slave to your
that's
body part.
it's a very tough question to answer because it's something I haven't figured out. But what I always say to myself is that perfection is in the journey, and you never find perfection without doing certain things wrong. So on the journey towards your perfection, you're going to do certain things that tread that line. Sometimes you're on the other side of line where you're a slave to your desires, and sometimes you're on the other side of line where you're disciplined and you're really pushing through to what you intend to do. I think it's a iterative process that, and you should learn from certain things that you do. Those times where you really know that you're not meant to be doing these things, learn from them. Those times when you're doing the things you're meant to be doing, like learn from those moments as well. And balancing that time, I think it's a matter of just really, it's a self-awareness thing. First of all, know yourself, like spend time with yourself, know yourself enough to know when you're doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. And that's where it starts. And then the next step is that I think is build habits that allow you to remove the thinking aspect from a lot of these things. Like the most successful people build habits that like are not, they remove the thinking in it, they remove the intuition and the aspiration in it, they create a system that just works. So build a habit that like I want to wake up at 5 o'clock every day, regardless of whether I have work or not. I want to wake up at 5 o'clock. This is an example that I tried and I failed dismally because 5 o'clock is
The
hella
5
early.
a.m. club.
The sun is not even out yet, and I'm like, why am I here? I don't even have work to do that needs me to be up at 5. But certain people do that, and they find like they just take the rationale out of it. Like I was still rationalizing, why am I doing this? But they just take the rationale of that. This is the time I wake up. This is the normal time for me to wake up. I'm not going to look at my neighbor and say that's the normal time for them to wake up. But I'm going to wake up at 5. Like be take the intuition and feeling out of it and just create a habit that's solely based on a system that allows you to do the things that you need to do. Um, but yeah, treading that line is hard. Profession is a journey, and everybody's on this journey towards what they think is a perfect life, I hope. And we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves because usually that then leads to like all the like I mean I never want to like belittle this, but like I think a lot of depression comes from people just not being happy with where they are and not being happy with the steps that they need to take to get to where they need to be. And that's an overgeneralization. I'm not an expert on it, but I really think that's the times when I've been depressed. Have been times like that where I'm not happy with who I am right now, and I know that these steps that I need to take, but like I don't even want to take these steps to get there. So just finding perfection on the journey and say my goal is perfection, but I'm gonna tread this line. Sometimes I'm gonna be on this side, sometimes I'm gonna be on this side. But finding that balance within yourself to know that okay, I've done enough about of this side. Let me maybe go on this side of the line and enjoy myself, and let me go back to the other side of the line and do these things and finding a balance that allows you to do both in a productive manner.
Mm. Yeah, so like basically being comfortable with walking on that tightrope and knowing that you might stumble either way.
You might fall either way. You might fall either way.
Mm.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
really being okay with yourself and being okay with yourself making mistakes. I think that's a big part of
Mm.
growing and learning is the sense that you you notice that you're making a mistake and you learn from it, and you're not hard on yourself for making that mistake, but
Mm-hmm.
you understand that tomorrow is a new day and I can choose to be on the other side of this line.
Mm-hmm.
If I've done something that's wrong and I feel as if it's wrong, I can be on the other side of this line tomorrow, and there's hope in that, and I can make decisions that allow me to learn from this decision and continue forward towards my goal.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think like faith has been a major like part for of that for you?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely has. It definitely has. The I don't I like speaking in analogies and metaphors, but I think
Yeah.
life is very colorful like that. And um, side note, like I read a book called *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, and it talks about how like the only thing that makes humans different to animals is that they have stories, they have
Mm.
narratives. Like animals can communicate, they can procreate, they can do all these things, but they don't have like a story. Like we have a story, we can talk about the story about where we came from and what we do and everything. So creating a narrative around that. So pushing it back to the question about faith, faith has allowed me, has the way I look at faith is this, it's a target. I'm an archer, but faith is my target. Like being
Mm.
perfect in my faith is my target. And I always continue shooting towards perfection. Sometimes it's a day that I may miss. Sometimes there's a day I may be on the bullseye, but it's always a target that does not move. It's always constant, and I can work towards being better in my faith. And that has really helped me in terms of just prioritize like other things as well around my faith, because I look at Christianity as such an important thing in my life that I can prioritize other things. Okay, I love helping people and I love
Mm.
talking to people. Is it an opportunity for me to share my faith? Is it an opportunity to talk about Christ? Is it an opportunity for me to, in these jokes that I'm sharing, like is it a joke that I can put in there and like maybe get
Yeah.
someone thinking about Christianity as an option? And yeah, so my faith definitely has helped me in terms of that. And that's something I made a conscious decision over the summer to just take more seriously, like go to
Mm.
church more often and be more present, serve a little bit more, and be disciplined in that as well, because that's another important factor of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to the faith aspect, because there's a lot of preaching and a lot of like things that we grow up with that are not very forgiving,
Yeah.
right? And like it can be very brutal, and I not know a lot of people have fallen off because of that, because they feel like they're irredeemable and so on.
Mm.
And then so how have you been? Because it sounds like you dwell a lot on like self knowledge and forgiving yourself and just like knowing how to walk that tightrope. How have you been able to navigate that on your own to get to that point, even from a faith perspective? Like, have you had to go a lot into like self teaching, or has it?
It's the perception of God or the creator that I have. So growing up, it was very rules based. You don't do this, guys don't do this, guys don't wear this, girls don't do this, girls don't wear this. And that made faith become like, that made me see God as just this person who wears a robe and is a judge, and he's just like hitting the thing and like, you're going to jail, you're not going to jail, you're going to jail. And like that's like the worst image of having of God, because he's really not that person. Does he judge? Yes. Does he have rules that you have to live by to like make him happy? Yes, he does. But on the flip side, God is such a loving person that he knew that you were going to make mistakes. He knew when he created you that you weren't going to be perfect. So why
Mm,
is it now that you're now trying to value that perfection that you were never made for? You were never made for perfection. And like understand that like I'll never be perfect. But does that stop me from working towards perfection? No, I'll still work towards it. But this is a goal that I'll always have that I may never ever attain, and being okay with that. Because what is perfection? Like that's a bigger like faith-based people say like perfection is living a life with no sin, but the Bible
mm,
it says that no one is perfect, right? Like no one is perfect, because if you were perfect then you would be God. So just having that understanding that like I'm not going to be perfect in my faith, I'm not going to be perfect in my life, but perfection will always be the goal, and I'll
mm,
always work towards it. And I know that the God that I serve is not, he's not a judge. He's just not a person who just set these rules arbitrarily for you to follow. And I don't think that's really the perception of God that people should have. God is forgiving. He's loving. He still loves you
mm,
even when you do those things that you think are irredeemable. He still listens to you and is still in your heart, even though you believe that like you're irredeemable. You can't. There's things that you've done that cannot be
Mm.
forgiven. So my perception of God changed, and that really happened when I came to Canada, because I like, it was very rules based in Zimbabwe, and when I came there,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, there's a different angle to look at this. Like,
Yeah.
if I looked at faith from a perspective of just rules, it's not fun. It's not entertaining. It's not something that I want to do, like, at all. Because if it's just like a extra list of, life is already hard. Now you're adding on this Bible of rules that I just need to follow, which I don't even understand why I'm
Mm.
following. So taking a step back and really understanding even though they're rules, but I'm not, my goal is perfection, but I'm not going to
Mm.
be perfect. There are certain things that I'll never ever be perfect at, and just being okay with that, like forgiving yourself and really just saying, okay, TK, this is something you may never be good at,
Mm.
and really understanding that and having that self awareness.
Mm. Well, the one of the last statements you made brought brought us to a different and interesting stage where I'm thinking about the perspective of coming from home, so from Zimbabwe, and like you mentioned the God aspect, but I'm just thinking of even the different versions or teachings of discipline that we have, even from coming from there and then coming here and having more of an imposter syndrome, so to speak, for a lot of us, where one, your ideas evolve and you really know what's now right for you, right?
Mhm.
But two, at the same time, there's a lot of ideas that you had that you thought you were going to throw away, but now start to come back.
Yeah, yeah.
So how has that worked for you in terms of selecting, and even that, like, knowing that the dynamic between I was taught this, but this is what's right, and
Mhm.
like how has that happened for you, and how does it even affect the interactions you have with even old friends or family or so on? Do you have that imposter syndrome thing pop up once in a while, or it's
Yes, it definitely does pop up. And what I may say now may be a little bit controversial or per se, but at the end of the day, when we go to when we die, and obviously I'm a Christian, so I believe that there's life after death, and there'll be a time when the Lord will judge, and the righteous will go to heaven, and those who accepted Christ as their personal savior will go to heaven, etc. I believe in that. That's something I've been taught to believe. I In believing that, I Christianity is such a personal decision that if you live your Christianity based on the lens of your pastor or of your parents, and you never make it your own, then you're doing a disservice to, firstly, yourself. Primarily, you're just doing a disservice to yourself. But this Christianity thing, your parents are not going to be there to answer for you when that happens. Like, your dad is not going to be there saying, no, like, he prayed at 4 a.m. in the morning when he lived with me. Like, he's not going to be there. It's going to be on you to answer for yourselves and the decisions that you make. Especially right now, like, I'm 25 years old. There's no way I'm going to expect my parents to argue my Christianity for me, because it has to be a me thing now. And I have to be okay with my Christianity. They may not be okay with it, but at the end of the day, who's really answering to what the most they can do is pray for me and show me a way that allows me to live Christianity the way that they envisioned it, which may be a great way. But if I never buy in and make Christianity my own, then what really am I doing? Because I'm
yeah.
going to account for myself. So why do I want to live it vicariously through someone else's lens of what
Mm.
Christianity is? So I really had to make it like a personal thing, but there's a lot of things I disagreed with within Christianity, but Christianity is the religion, right? Like, it's a, like, especially viewing it as a religion where it's rules. Don't do this. Don't hang out with these people. Don't love this person. Don't do this with this person because they do this in their personal life. And I'm like, my role as a Christian was never to judge and to never put anyone down, but just to show love. And I love people, and I'll forever love people, regardless of whatever they do, regardless of what they ever affiliate with. I'll always share love. Do I need to agree with what you do? Do I need to agree with everything that you say? If it's hateful, no, I don't have to agree with it.
Mm.
But when I love you, I'll always love you. And that's what my Christianity is about. Like, it's not rules based, but it's more based on love and showing that regardless of who you are, color of skin, what you choose to do in your life, there's someone who loves you the way you are. Like, the
Yeah.
way you are, there's someone who's intentional about you, who cares about you. And that's the way I had to teach myself Christianity, as opposed to just looking at as God as this rule maker who just
Mhm.
makes us want to live an unpleasant life.
Yeah. I mean, this
Yeah.
reminds me of something I read that says, and it's been preached by quite a few people now that I'm familiar with about God can't heal who you pretend to be, and I think
Hmm.
this is this is true for any process that you have of healing, whether that healing for you comes from a point of religion or if you're still pretending to be a version of yourself that I don't know that you were raised to become or that that you want the world to see you or perceive you as, you will never actually get to that point where the discipline comes in because you're not even starting from the truth. You're starting from
Hmm.
a point like if I say I want to be disciplined with, let's say how often I go to the gym, for example, and I begin by lying to myself that I can do 2 times a week consistently, whether
Hmm.
or not I think about it, whether I'm conscious, whether I write it on a calendar or not, I can do this instead of just telling myself that no, like even going up the stairs is a struggle for me. So for me to
Yeah.
start going to the gym means that I even have to pray about it 2 nights before and fast about it before I can get to that place. I don't know. There's just like a level of pretentiousness that comes with trying to impress your upbringing that can actually stop you from attaining the discipline or the goals that you're talking about, whether you're religious about it or not, whether you're coming from a Christian perspective or you're just coming
Hmm.
from a spiritual perspective or emotional perspective, whatever it is, you have to deal with what's going on in here. And that brings me to, to another question as well. When it comes to that aspect, because there's not just the background, but there's the, and you've brought this up a few times, there's the being conscious of who you are going along this with as
Hmm.
well. So there's the friends that you're bringing into it who either discourage or encourage that continuous development from you. Now,
Hmm.
how do you know? I know it sounds like a basic question when it's asked, because it's like, okay, I'll go to the friend who says, well done the most or whatever it is. But there's a lot of times when even, and energy is an overused word, but
Hmm.
where where
The
someone's
vibes. The vibes are not right.
where even someone's presence doesn't just take you a day back, it takes you weeks back from your goals. And it's very hard to come to terms with, I guess, when you've been around people for that long. But like, I don't know, have you had to navigate that on a personal basis where you look at it and you're like, this actually has to go? And given if you have, how hard has it been as well?
It's extremely hard. There's
Mm,
seasons in my life where my current like person who I say my best friend was not my best friend. We didn't talk and we didn't hang out because I was going through another season of like being with other friends and other people. Um, and just having like I don't know, I keep saying self-awareness. Like I came to a point where I'm like, no, like this person is good for me. Like let me be friends with them. Um, it's hard cutting off people. It's hard cutting off anyone in your life, especially those who have been there through the most significant moments of your life.
mm,
So, um, yeah, like I just remember there's a person I dated in university, and it was like through a really tough time, like of like university when like school was tough, like things back home were a little bit hard, and although we had a toxic relationship in the sense
yeah.
that it was like two broken people coming together and trying to mend whatever they were going through, it was good for that moment. But looking back at it, I'm like, when I broke it off or when we stopped seeing each other, it was out of a decision of we hurt people. And like, I didn't want to stay in this place anymore where I was just there for the comfort and for the attention because I felt as if I was lacking it elsewhere. So
Mm,
it's always a tough decision to make, especially when you're trying to break off a friendship or break up something. But I never say, I'm not an advocate for severing ties. I'm not an advocate for burning bridges. I'll
mm,
always say that there's certain people that you keep close. There's certain people that are part of your outer circle, and then there's some people that you just know. And
yeah.
being able to switch people between those three um like things is the best. Like being
Mm,
able to know who's in my inner circle, who's my go-to in my time of need, who's in my outer circle. They're not really my go-to, but I can still hang out with them and have good conversation with them. And then who's the newer people that I know where maybe it's once a month or once every 6 months. I go for dinner with them and I meet up with them and go like, oh, how's life? Catch up. And having that self-awareness is so important in
mm,
terms of knowing that. And
mm,
sometimes I've had to have a conversation. I had a conversation with one of my I wouldn't say friends, but someone who I hung out with quite a lot. And I was like, dude, like we hang out, but like this is not it. Like we never do anything productive when we hang out. We never talk about anything. We're only talking about other people when we hang out. Like we had to call each other out on our BS and go like, this is not it. Like if our friendship does not change from this, then what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point of having this friendship? Is it's not progressing us in any way, shape, or form towards any goal that we have. So, and then lastly, the thing that, um, two things actually, two quotes. My mom always used to say, "Oh, show me your five closest friends, and I'll show you who you are." In every season of your life, you may be a different person, you know, and maybe that means those friends, those five people who are closest to you, have to change. If I'm in a season of my life where, for example, I want to get really fit and like I want to like go to the gym and fix my health up, if I'm in a season of my life where I'm going through that and my friends are not about that, then I need to find friends who are doing that. If
Mm.
my friend is engaged and I'm not engaged, our lifestyles are completely different. He needs to find friends that like are also
Yeah.
part of that life. Like when I get married, I'm going to look for friends who are also married, because I'm not going to hang out single people. It's a season in your life, and it's okay to say to people, "Yo, I'm not hating you. I'm not severing ties, and I'm not burning bridges. But you're not. You have
Mm.
to just switch to go into my outer circle. Because in my inner circle, I need people who are also going through the same life experiences as
Mm.
me. Like if it's something that's important." And the
Mm.
last thing I'll say is that the Bible, is it the Bible? People just, like, is it English saying that good company corrupts bad, what
Bad
bad
company
company,
corrupts good character. Yeah.
good character, right? So if you think you're a good person and you're hanging around bad people, you may think you're strong and it will never affect you, but you start picking up on some nuanced behaviors that
Mm.
start latching onto it. Oh, they say things like this, they do things like this, they think out loud like this. And although you may say I'm okay and I'll never subscribe to that way of thinking, you have to be really careful, because where you spend your most time, like you start learning and picking up on certain things, and you start implementing those things in your life as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like what you said on this in terms of not like cutting off people entirely and so on, because I fully agree with that, with the idea that I say this to everyone who does come into my life. I have different friends for different things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily that I like rotate you season wise. It depends. I guess you do subconsciously. But I know exactly who to phone when I need to have a business
Mm-hmm.
conversation. I know exactly who to phone when I'm in a crisis of faith. I know exactly who to call when I need relationship advice. There's no way. And then there's some very close friends to me that don't know even like this particular element, because they have absolutely no advice to give when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think a lot of times we fail in that aspect because we're expecting um, like people to give us what they're incapable of. You're
Mm-hmm.
expecting someone who's in primary school to solve an algebra equation for you. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It almost comes down to being your fault for not being able to be conscious enough. And I guess that's another element of the discipline itself, like being able to be emotionally intelligent as well, and like think for people before you even request of them like certain things that they're not able to produce, or else you end up creating enemies.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
You have to know yourself and really know the people you're hanging out with. And
Mhm.
I would never blame someone else for, like, especially now. I'm 25. I'm an adult. I'm grown. I can never blame someone else for my bad behavior or for something
Mhm.
bad that I do. That would be very immature of me and very irresponsible of me of not taking the blame for something that I would have done. There's no way someone can tell me, "Yo, let's go jump off this cliff." And if I choose to do it at my age,
Yeah.
that's nothing to do on them. That's on me completely. And being okay with understanding that, like, okay, this is TK. You messed up here. Like, you
Mhm.
made a bad decision. It's not on that other person. It's on you, because
Yeah.
you made the decision to do it. You're very fully conscious of what you're doing. So yeah, it's true. Like not yeah. And then that's always come back to what I said before. Like, don't be too hard on yourself, but don't don't learn the lesson that you need to learn. Bear the fruit of the
Mhm.
season you're in, and move on from that season.
Yeah. But it's the same thing that you said about the environment as well, that you create for yourself
Mm-hmm.
even at home. Like making sure that, like you mentioned, waking up early, like being conscious of what it means to you, or I don't know, taking the junk food out of your fridge when you're in a diet. I would say it's the same even for people as well, though, that to some extent, you also need to make sure that you're only including people who also understand the fact that they could potentially be not seasonal. Seasonal is a harsh word, but that like you're also transitioning and there's no hard feelings. It's just like not for right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think we've gone through a lot of aspects. We've gone through the mental aspect of it, the social aspect, educational, professional, the
Faith.
faith aspect, which
Mhm.
is massive, massive even for me. And I know
Mhm.
some people may not be able to relate to, but spirituality is a thing, I think, across whether you believe in Christianity or
Or
not.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But is there like one last thing that you'd like us to take away from this? Well, like
Oh.
a like a super like speech that you had prepared, or
Uh, Not really. If anything comes to mind, as I said before, I work on quotes and reading and like picking up like nuggets from different people. I think it was Jay Prince. He said it on a podcast that um, every day you get a chance and a choice, and it's up to you to do what you want. Like with that chance and a choice, you get a chance to live a life. You get a chance to you can make a choice to live that life, and that has been something that like just rung in my head for the last 2 days. This discipline thing is hard. It's not easy. It's not a journey that you can create like step by step, small things that like lead to this big outcome. It's hard, and you're going to go ups and down. It's not a linear journey, but um, from my perspective and what I've learned on just trying to be more disciplined is that be able to forgive yourself and be able to learn from your mistake and move on from that. I don't have many other words, but yeah, I really hope the conversation was helpful to those who have listened. And thank you for inviting me over for the podcast.
Oh, I hate how you gave us a gem at the end because now in my mind I'm thinking I almost went choice is a whole other topic
That's a
altogether.
big topic. We can do an episode 2 on that, but that's a big topic. Chance and a choice.
Choice?
It's a lot. It's a lot.
No. But thank you so much, TK. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I am pretty sure there's been a lot to learn for the people who've come this far with us. And like we said, we spoke about the spirituality aspect, professional, and so on. So it's really up to you which part you're going to choose. And I will add TK's social media information as well to the descriptions. And yeah, it'll be in my bio on Instagram too. So for now, thank you again, TK, for joining us. Thank you all for listening, and you guys take care.
Awesome. Thank you.